Eve Barlow is a Scottish-born, Los Angeles-based music journalist who has written for nearly every significant culture magazine out there, including Variety and GQ. But she's not here to talk about my passion for country music. In responding to what the Anti-Defamation League is calling, quote, a dangerous and drastic surge in anti-Jewish hate, Eve has essentially become a part-time music journalist and full-time Zionist and fighter of online anti-Semitism. Eve, let's just get right into it. You exploded onto the scene during the recent escalation in the Israeli-Palestinian tensions and the uptick in anti-Semitic hate crimes roiling major cities all across the country. You've talked about losing work, friends, and invitations to social events because of your activism, and you even compared what's happening to you to a pogrom. How are you holding up, and what has this experience been like for you for the past few months?
I'm holding up okay, actually. I'm kind of concentrating on the bigger picture and seeing the experience that I've had is not unique or singular to me, and I don't really want to concentrate on making it about me. It's more about making it about the fact that I represent something that's going on that we should all be concerned about, which is the fact that Jewish hate has become publicly acceptable and that it's been given permission to fester. For me, I have been sharing my experience of my own, social exclusions as a sort of an aside to the bigger picture at large, which is Jews being attacked in the street and Jews being banned from certain events or under the premise of anti-Zionism and this apparent method of people being able to replace the word Jews with the word Zionists and then being allowed to exclude Jews wholeheartedly without consequence or ramification.
Yeah, this seems to be happening really fast. And you wrote in an article for Tablet that Twitter, quote, will not be free Palestine, but it will certainly make the world a more anti-Semitic place. I often say that Twitter is not real life, but I do feel like we've seen the anti-Semitism on social media spill over into the real world. Do you think that Jews will be targeted on the street so long as they are targeted on the web? Or do you think the two are actually separate issues?
I think they're intrinsically linked, actually. And we can't ignore the fact that during the conflict, so many false narratives were and the conflict between Israel and Hamas in May, I should specify, so many false narratives were being shared online, and there was a direct link for me to the uptick in anti-Semitism that we saw in the streets that then wasn't getting enough attention on mainstream media. Because if there are false narratives and prejudices being spread about Jewish people online every day, in thousands upon thousands of tweets and retweets and impressions by people who are deemed trustworthy because they have huge platforms, they're social media influencers, they're celebrities, they have authoritative voices, even if it's the mainstream media that's promoting bias and one-sided narratives, then of course those people who are waiting for permission to be hateful towards Jewish people have just been granted it.
Yeah, and one thing that has come up a lot is the distinctions between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Do you think there's a difference, and how do you react to progressives who say they're getting called anti-Semites for just being critical of Israeli policies? I was raised as a Zionist. I consider myself a Zionist. I have been so defiant. I now have it in my Twitter bio. I think the attempt to sort of redefine what Zionism is in this incredibly toxic and dangerous way is one of the things that is scaring me the most. How do you respond to all of this?
Yeah, it's very difficult because there is so much misinformation about what Zionism actually means. Zionism is truly just defined by the right for Jewish people to self-determine in their ancestral homeland. And that's all it means. It's not about where the Israeli government currently is at. It's not about current politics. It's just the belief that the state of Israel should exist. This has allowed for Jewish people to be attacked in the street in the name of anti-Zionism, but the people who are attacking Jews, they're not asking those Jewish people if they're Zionists before they're attacking them. They're identifying them as Jews.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly important to point out. In recent weeks, during some of the Pride celebrations, we've seen some really unfortunate language coming out of some corners of the LGBTQ world. Things like, quote, Zionism is queerphobic, as someone like yourself who is also part of the LGBTQ community. How do you respond to statements like these, and how do you reconcile the idea that these two parts of your identity somehow can't coexist with one another?
It's really, really difficult, and it is like having to you hit the nail on the head when you talk about having to try and reconcile different multitudes within myself. I just don't feel as safe or comfortable in alternative queer spaces anymore because of the amount of anti-Zionism that's allowed to exist. And it's so cruelly ironic given, I was sharing the other day the incredible images from the streets of Tel Aviv over the past weekend that hosted the biggest Pride celebration yet to occur in 2021. I think there were over 100,000 people in the streets in Tel Aviv, in a city where the slogan is "Love is love," and LGBTQ plus community is completely accepted and celebrated. It's one of the most incredible Pride displays every single year. So for me, it's ironic and strange to feel like in a country like America, I'm pushed out of queer spaces because I'm a proud Jew and a Zionist.
Eve, this past week, Mumford & Sons banjoist Winston Marshall left the band out of concern that he, quote, couldn't speak freely without fear that the online mob would retaliate against his bandmates. He felt he had to choose between being an artist and speaking his mind. I know you know what that feels like. You have been at the brunt and faced similar. You have been, the victim of a huge online mob simply for being a Zionist. What do you do with these conundrums? I know it's something many people who will not bend the knee to groupthink are struggling with right now. What do you think the future is like for those of us who are Zionists and free thinkers and, want to live in a space where we can speak openly?
I mean, this is about a wider question of censorship, isn't it? And I think there's a reason why I've come to be so passionate about the advocacy that I'm doing online for the Jews. It's because I am a Jewish person, A, but B, I'm also a journalist who's always believed in the power of using your integrity to bring the truth to light and to not be afraid of having uncomfortable conversations or inserting nuance into the dialogue that we're having. And unfortunately, what we see on the internet is so much proliferation of groupthink because people exist in their own echo chambers, and the condition for continuing to be in those echo chambers, whether they're online or offline, seems to be that you have to go in wholesale and you can never offer any kind of avenue outside of what the group agrees upon as all of the tenets that it believes in or that it stands by. And what happened to Winston Marshall in the past couple of months, actually, because I think the original tweet was in March, it's just absurd to think that a man who was in one of the most successful bands on the planet tweeted about a book, whatever your reservations are about the author or the book itself. It was one tweet about a book, and the response to it was so damaging and detrimental to his life and potentially the life of his bandmates that he had to, of his own volition. And we can question how much it was a voluntary decision, or and how much the pressure must have played into that. But he's had to walk away from a career in a band for over 10 years. And we can have disagreements on whether or not he should have read that book or I don't know. I don't know enough about the author and the book itself. But what I do know is that it seems as though the reaction and the cost that it's had upon him and his livelihood is disproportionate to the action that he took.
Yeah, nothing in history positive ever came from banning books. Even, I really admire you. I admire your bravery. I admire everything that you have gone through. You have my support publicly and privately. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I am a proud Zionist. I'm not going to stop saying it. I don't care how much pressure there is. And I know you aren't either. And as long as there's people like us fighting, in my opinion, for justice, we're going to be fine. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me and taking the time today.
Thank you always for your allyship, Meghan, and you're wonderful. Thank you so much.
So are you.